Check it out, guys. I am making something super special today. It's a caramel apple pie. Not just a caramel apple pie, a salted caramel apple pie. You want a caramel apple pie though, you gotta start with caramel. So I just added a cup of sugar to a small pot, turn it on, add a 1/4 cup of water, and then wait. I have this cup of water with a pastry brush, and I use that to brush down the side so no crystals form, because the bane of caramel are crystals forming around the edge that cause the entire thing to crystallize, which is the exact opposite of what you want when you're making caramel. You can turn your heat up, swirl your pot, and you kind of just have to let it go. So you can put the lid on, and what happens then is that steam forms on the top of the lid and sort of drops down and runs down the sides. And that does the same thing as the pastry brush dipped in water. But I like to keep an eye on my caramel, so I always do it open. Okay, now it's boiling. What's happening here is that the water's gonna boil out of the sugar, and then when all the water's boiled out, that's when it's gonna start cooking and getting a little more caramel colored, and then that's when you really have to wash it, because it can go really quickly from very pale golden to almost burnt. It's a pale golden right now. I take the caramel for this recipe pretty dark because it gets mixed in with all of my apples, and so I want a really intense caramel flavor to start off with. I'm gonna wait just another few seconds so it gets a little bit darker. See how dark it is? Now you want to remove it from the heat. I'm just going to turn this off, and you add a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. Be careful when you do this, it's going to bubble up. So you want to make sure you're using a nice deep pot so that it doesn't bubble over. And then 4 tablespoons of butter. 1 1/4 teaspoons of coarse salt. If you're using fine, use 3/4 of a teaspoon. It's much saltier. And then stir. While you're making your pie filling, it should cool, and then you can mix everything together. If it's too warm when you add it to your pie, it's gonna melt your pie crust, and you don't want that. So here I have my apples. 3 pounds of apples. I'm using a combination of apples. Granny Smith are really nice for tanginess. McIntosh are great for pure apple flavor. Rome, Cortland, the list goes on. So peel your apples. Have I ever told you how much I love this Y peeler? It's my favorite peeler. It is not fancy, it's very inexpensive, but I find it sits in your hand better than any other peel. Just in case you were wondering. Cut the apples into 1/2-inch wedges. I usually just cut around the core and then cut a little piece off just to make sure I'm not wasting too much apple. You can use an apple corer if you desire. Apple pie season is the end of pie season. It's the last fruit of the year. It's so sad. Add 1/2 cup of sugar to this, and then some lemon juice, about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 3/4 of a teaspoon of coarse salt, and then 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour for thickening. Stir that all up, get it nice and combined. Now, you will add 3/4 of a cup of the cooled caramel. The caramel will sort of seize up a little bit on the cool apples, but don't worry about it. When it goes into the oven, it will remelt and then coat everything really evenly. You can see it's a little bit sticky right now. That's because the apples are cool and it's setting the caramel. I'm just gonna clean up and get my crusts. It's time for the pie crust. I've shown you how to make pie crust before, so check out my video. This is a beautiful pie crust, nice and buttery. I can see there's lots of bits of butter in there for flake. So I'm going to show you how to make a lattice today. Take your pie crust out of the fridge about 5 to 10 minutes before you want to roll it out. It depends on how warm it is in your kitchen. Sometimes I like to go around the edges a little bit with my fingers and just soften it slightly if it's a little bit too hard. Dust your surface with flour and dust the top of your dough with flour, and then start rolling. You can also bang on the dough to soften it slightly. It makes a loud noise, but it works really well to start the softening process off. Hey, give it a try. Start rolling. You're looking to get a circle that's about between 11 and 12 inches across here. Don't worry if the edges crack just a little bit, because those usually get trimmed off. But if the center cracks, you want to patch that, because you don't want cracks in the center. If you're a little bit uncomfortable about rolling dough, or it's really warm in your kitchen, you can do this on a piece of parchment paper, which allows you to transport it back into the fridge really quick if you need to. Crazy stuff can happen to your dough if it gets too warm, and you always want to make sure that it stays as cool as possible during the entire process until it gets into the oven, and that's what will make nice flaky pie crust. Okay, that seems about right. You want to roll it out till it's about 11 inches in diameter. This seems pretty good. Make sure that it's not sticking, and then you can cut your lattice strips. You need to cut your dough into at least 16 pieces. You can be really careful and measure all of your strips, but I never do. I already rolled out and lined my 9-inch pie plate. I'm gonna put my apples right in there. This is when it's really important that the caramel is not hot anymore, because the caramel will melt the pie crust and then it'll be soggy on the bottom. Get all your caramel in there. Even out your apples and then start topping. I like to put the long strips on first in the center, like this. At least 8 strips across. So here's what you do for lattice. It's actually really easy. I start from the center. So you fold every other strip back to the center. I use my finger just to anchor it in place, and then lay a strip across and then fold them back. Then you fold every other one, the ones that were covered, you fold those back. If you want a really, really tight lattice, you can put them closer together. You want a loose lattice, more farther apart. So this is the part where it can tend to get a little bit soft as you're working with it, and you can always put it back into the fridge if you need to. And then you just go and do the other side straight to the center. Same process. All done. Press to seal. Then go around the edges and cut. You want to leave about a 1-inch border. Now you're cutting off all the weird edges and all that stuff, and you're going to seal the top and the bottom crust together. I like to fold up because that covers up those little edges and makes a cute crust. You can finish the edge however you want. If you want to crimp with a fork, that's a really nice way to finish, but I like to crimp my edges. I just go in with my fingers, thumb and forefinger, and then just second forefinger press in. And then just go all the way around to make your decorative edge. And then the last part is for beauty only, so you don't have to do this part. Brush it with egg wash. This is a whole egg. Okay. One last thing, sprinkle with some sanding sugar if you have it, or regular sugar if you don't. Sanding sugar just is a little bit more sparkly. One last thing, sprinkle with a little bit of salt on the very top. Now what you want to do is freeze this for 20 minutes. What that does is allow the crust to get really firm and cold before it goes into a hot oven at 375 degrees, and then you bake it until it's golden brown on the top and on the bottom. That's why I put it in a glass pie plate so you can see the bottom. And bubbling in the center, it'll take about 1 hour and 20 to 1 hour and 30 minutes. That's right, 1 hour and a half. Seems like a long time, but that's how you get a really well-baked pie. And it's done. When it's baked, make sure you let it cool completely to allow the juices to thicken, and then you can dig in. After the first bite, I think you'll agree, it's gonna be your new favorite apple pie. Salted caramel apple pie.